It's September 7th, 2020. I'm going to talk to my good friend Hrvoje Moric from the Geopolitics and Empire podcast, which I thought was run from Kazakhstan, but he took a narco sub and managed to find his way to Mexico. Or at least last time I spoke, you said, well, I'm thinking about bailing Kazakhstan and the only way I'm going to get out is through a narco sub. So how did you move to Mexico? Tell us.
No, you got the story right. But by the way, I forgot to mention I spent a night in Amsterdam on my way back. So, yeah.
Next time you look me up, yeah, I'll be offended if you skip next time. But you're in Mexico. You moved your family to Mexico. First question is why?
For now we're in Mexico. Why? Well, because of everything that's happening, and I felt Mexico was one of the better places to be to wait out, the potential economic collapse or other aspects. And I felt my intuition was confirmed because there's some of the people I've had on my podcast, experts, have kind of confirmed the similar notion. And then there's Daniel Estulin, the Bilderberg guy, right? He's also moving to Mexico. So I see a number of people choosing Mexico as a go-to place in case of what's coming. There's talk of war and economic collapse and other aspects, totalitarian political regimes rising. So you're kind of a special guy with regards to the passports that you hold. You have a bunch of nationalities, so Mexico was one option. Why didn't you go to the United States? I mean, there's a bunch of states that you could have picked. Yeah, well, the U.S., it's a high cost of living, right? But also, right now, I feel like you don't want to be in the U.S. Because of what's happening. It's going to be like a civil war, revolutionary scenario. Martial law. There's a lot of talk. I think we're going to see things that we never would have imagined. And again, I've had other experts tell me the same thing. So right now is not, I think, a good place to be in the U.S. for the November chaos that's coming and beyond, as well as the potential for war, the high cost of living. And one thing, I interviewed the Jewish historian Edwin Black, who wrote about the nexus between Hitler and the American companies like IBM and Ford, and who all helped Hitler carry out his Holocaust. And he said that the US and China, we were discussing this totalitarian social credit system that China has. And he said it's going to happen in all of the planet, but that US and China are going to lead the way to install this first. So that was another reason for me coming to Mexico, is like, it's going to take a bit longer to get down to Mexico, to the developing world.
For that story, I don't recall that watching that interview. I watched pretty much all your interviews, the Geopolitics and Empire podcast. That's on my list of the stuff that I watch everything on. But did he say that it was going to make a difference whether Biden would win or Trump would win, or doesn't it matter?
Well, he just said that we're going to see in November conducts of action that we never would have imagined in the United States. So this is like I view it as a historic moment. It's like a 1930s moment. We're living basically in a World War, Great Depression scenario where we're going to experience things like our grandparents experienced. And I mean, I personally don't think it matters the outcome, whether it's Biden or Trump, because the elites or whatever have the same idea in mind, which is to push America towards a more authoritarian
in
system.
The 1930s, it all started on the European continent. So what you're saying is this time around, it might start within the United States? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can see the same trend. And myself as a history teacher, professor, what's happening now with the BLM and Antifa movement, it's kind of had me rethink past history. When you look at the French Jacobin Revolution and the Russian Bolshevik Revolution, and you can extrapolate and see the same trend now with the BLM Antifa, where we know that BLM Antifa is this similar left-wing Jacobin Marxist violent political revolutionary movement, but they're being funded by the oligarchs and the financiers, BLM and Antifa, to destroy tradition, religion, and the political system, the status quo, to establish a new system that the elites want. They are the useful idiots, Antifa and BLM. And if you go back to the Russian Revolution, you see that Lenin and them were financed as well by European banksters, let's say. And then if I guess it would be similar thing with the 1789 French Revolution as well. In some cases, there was an agenda behind destroying this old order and establishing a new system. So I feel like that's kind of what history is kind of repeating in this sense, and it's America's turn.
Is this what you're teaching your classes as well?
I mean, I mentioned this, but currently we're not touching this subject, so no, I don't talk about that.
What I'm really asking, let me phrase it differently. Would you self-censure? Because this is not a common narrative that you just explained.
No, I don't self-censor. I mean, that's the whole point of history and politics, is looking at all of the perspectives and then coming to your conclusion as a teacher, as a student.
Yeah, fair enough. However, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, so we're all social justice warriors now, at least on the universities. So teachers, history teachers in the United States wouldn't really bring it the way across the way you just did, I feel.
No, that's why I'm lucky, because that's one reason I left the US, because you couldn't do that in the US. You'd be immediately canceled, right? So that's why I've been around the world in more, let's say, conservative areas like Central Asia or Latin America, where the population is still a bit more conservative, and they're not into that cancel culture yet. In the near future, I mean, it's slowly here and it's slowly filtering in and coming, but still, like, the society of Kazakhstan is more conservative, and this kind of stuff doesn't fly with them yet.
So there were two examples that passed by both of us in the past week that I want to talk to you about. One is of one of my financial analyst heroes, so to speak, Mr. James Rickards, who's written books called The Death of Money, for instance.
Well, I have it right here, I think.
Is it? Yeah, be well. Oh,
yeah.
You can actually pull it up.
You got
Road to Ruin. Oh, you got the new ones as well. Yeah, cool. So, all right. So, where do you? Okay, this is. I wasn't aware that you had read his. You've read them also, right? Yeah. Yeah, you have them. Having them. Okay. Anyway, is he wrong somewhere, or is he spot on? What do you think?
With his recent tweet about the coup in America.
Yeah. No, we'll get to that in a second. But his books. So. Where
I think largely he's got it right. And even before I read Rickards, I was teaching 10 years ago about the IMF and the special drawing, just the economic. One thing that he talks about is that the dollar will be replaced by like the IMF special drawing, right? Yeah. Like this one world, currency type thing. And I've had that in mind as well. So I've kind of seen that coming. So I mean, nobody's perfect. No one gets it 100%, but I think he's had a lot of good to say.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm having questions about the IMF special drawing rights being the replacement to the world reserve currency currently being the dollar. Who knows what's going to happen? But that's his thesis. I really like his analysis. And he tweeted out just the other day, 7 days in November. We're not watching an election campaign. We're watching a coup d'etat in the making. Here's the playbook. Not much time to prepare. So, Hrvoje, in your opinion, having talked to so many people through your Geopolitics and Empire podcast, what's going to happen in the US and abroad after November 3rd?
Nothing good or positive, I see. And he's referencing 7 days in November to that film. I think it was a book and a film, 7 Days in May, from the 1950s and 60s, that discussed a fascist military corporate coup in the US. I'm not sure if it was during the time of JFK. And if we go back in the 1930s, we had the most decorated soldier, Smedley Butler, who they tried to get him to participate in a fascist coup to take down the US. So there's this clear history from 1930s coup attempt and beyond to take down the US. And I think that it's finally come to a head, that this is finally a serious situation. And what we're seeing now with Trump is like a reverse color revolution. So the US or these international financiers like Open Society, Soros, and who have been running these regime change operations for the past 20 years around the world, Georgia, Ukraine, Iran attempts, Serbia, Moldova. I can't remember all the countries. And it's finally now being done against the US to overthrow this US constitutional republic. And I think ultimately to replace it with an authoritarian system based on technocracy, right? The rule of science and technology and scientific dictatorship. And that's why I think it doesn't matter who's going to win. The economy is going to get worse and authoritarianism is going to rise. Kind of just like in the 1930s, where you saw it all across the board, Spain, Italy, Germany, and many countries. And I just kind of see that no matter what happens, that trend line is going to continue because it hasn't stopped for decades. It's just been continuing. This totalitarianism just continues regardless of who's in power. So regardless of whether it's Trump or Biden, I think that's not even the question. People ask, is Biden going to win or Trump? It doesn't matter because that's going to continue and it's going to be chaos. So
me asking you as a historian then, as a history teacher, you know what I do. I spend all my waking hours when I'm not spending them on my family, walking the dog and all the other things. I spend them on making podcasts. Is that a smart thing to do, or should I stop being such an outspoken public person and just find a nice, friendly little job out of the sight of cameras? What's better for my health?
I guess it's up to you. I've asked that same question. I feel like producing a podcast is participating in this fight for liberty. You see Thomas Jefferson behind me with the quote that says, "Liberty begins with you. All tyranny needs to gain a foothold is for people of a good conscience to remain silent." So what makes me feel better is discussing this subject. But I kind of feel, as you said, if you find some job and just keep your head down and shut up, I don't think you're going to even be safe with that in the end, because ultimately, if this machine continues, there will be no place to hide. It's like in the Soviet Union, people who had nothing to hide and didn't do anything wrong, we have countless of examples of them being sent to the gulags or taken away. So even if you do keep your head down and shut up, you'll still get caught up in the totalitarian systems. So my view is kind of go down with a blaze of glory, right?
Well, I had no intention of stopping. It's just one of those questions that comes to mind. So what is a good approach? Well, there are more violent protests here now, and I'm uncomfortable with that. I'm not even a protesting kind of guy. I don't hold my banners and stuff. That's not what I do. I do this, but that's a choice that you have now. Are we going to do the friendly discussions, nice and safely, hidden behind YouTube or the other channels? Are we going to bang on the doors of our parliament? Historically spoken, only the pitchforks and the torches in the end make a difference. It wasn't podcasts.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we also need to have a group of people. I mean, where I am, I'd happily go peacefully, right? Protest, but a group hasn't formed, and maybe that's part of the job to, as you're saying, activism, peaceful, nonviolent activism. So that's something we have to look at.
So what Rick has quoted was, as if 2020 were not insane enough already, we now have Democrats and their ruling class masters openly talking about staging a coup. You might have missed it, what with the riots, lockdowns, and other daily mayhem we're forced to endure in this. The most wretched year of my lifetime, but it's happening. So I was wondering, the American electoral process. Let's say, first question: who's going to win, Hrvoje? Let's bet $100. Who's going to win?
Yeah, I think the elections will be contested, so like nobody. But I guess I would say Trump will probably.
Okay, I'm not taking that bet. I think he's going to win. Also, I think he's going to win by a landslide. But still, let's say it's contested. What are the odds that there will not be a president elected, and that other rule would kick into place, like the Speaker of the House on January 20th? Is that something that you take seriously? Would that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think all bets are off. I think, like I said, we're in that 1930s moment where we can expect things that we never would have imagined. Like, it's that serious. But beyond the speaker, the next in line or whatever coming to power, I think if you should listen to Whitney Webb, who I've interviewed, who has unlimitedhangout.com as her website. She does great analysis into this, but the continuity of government. So that's something from the 1980s, where it's basically the military running the show. And apparently in March, they've activated, Nancy Pelosi even mentioned this, that she had meetings with the military folk who are dealing with this continuity of government, which is, as the scenario you painted, whether if it's a contested election or the president is assassinated or something, it's the military, or there's an emergency. It's this thing called the COG, continuity of government, that's going to run the show. And basically, it's like a military dictatorship. And so I think that's something that's there, because they've already activated that, and they've been wanting to do that for a long time. So that's the real danger, that the U.S. becomes this military dictatorship. And I interviewed the famous Johan Galtung, the founder of Peace and Conflict Studies, who in 1980, he said specifically that in 1990, the Soviet Union would collapse. And it happened exactly as he predicted. And one of my most popular interviews with him some years ago, he said that in 2020, the U.S. empire would collapse and become a dictatorship. So again, we've got that trend line coming again, where the empire collapses and becomes this military dictatorship. For how long, who knows? But that's what I've been saying, that's the future.
Oh, there's so you're a guest to the Potkaars podcast. These are conversations of hope, people that shed light. You're one of them. You're running your podcast, informing me with this fantastic interviews that you do with those people. So one of the upsides is Martin Armstrong, in my book anyway. He runs his Armstrong Economics, and he does everything. He makes a cyclical analysis, and he looks at history, and he takes a long approach. So he looks at the Roman Empire declining and all these empires declining, and he sees a decline also, and says, well, we're in for a ride at least until 2024, and it's not going to improve until 2032. But after that, the power shifted to China probably, and we'll be back in 1945, kind of, and recovering.
Well, I guess the hope would be, as you've seen in past history, when these things happened in France or Britain or whatever, when the British Empire collapsed, it just became a republic again, and it kind of rebirthed itself, and then for that country it was okay. It's like a cleansing. So maybe you'll have a couple of years of chaos, and the hope would be that it becomes a functioning state again. It's
the blood in the street and the hunger that scares me. And I have two small kids, and you've small kids. So another question is, in my understanding, the struggle between Biden and Trump, like Democrats and it's not even between Democrats and Republicans anymore. It's more it's a different divide. But anyway, the people supporting the Biden DNC side of things, in a way, that would be the Wall Street bankers, right? The way I understand it anyway. Do you have a gut feeling who the military would support in the end?
Well, I would think, again, also we have some aspects of Wall Street supporting Trump. I'm not fully convinced with Trump, although on paper, on the surface, it seems he represents the traditional American interests, which is why I think he would win by a landslide. Most Americans see Trump as representing that category, but I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure about who Trump is and the final motivations. Like, on the surface, I would agree with what he represents, but again, I'm not so certain. But who the military would support? Well, initially there were some generals who signed, military people who signed a letter supporting a coup against Trump, and I guess recently, like a week or two ago, it was reported that no, that they wouldn't do that. It's hard to say though, because when you have to wait until it really comes, maybe they won't show their cards so early. So it's really hard to say. I can't answer that question.
We just did a conversation earlier on your channel, and I'm gonna refer to that after this conversation also. People can see that. When we talked to about Julian Assange also, what just comes to mind is Trump is going hard, if he has a say in this at all. But if he has a say in this, the United States is coming down really hard on Assange, and outside of any legal juridical rules that we have, it's all outside of the law, and it's really going down hard on him. Well, if he wants to appease like CIA or NSA or the other exposed entities, if he wants to make friends in that military, he would go down hard on Assange. Or am I connecting dots that shouldn't be connected?
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. I don't know. Recently I interviewed the Australian military man who was in support of Assange and what he did. So there is a group, I think, of the military intelligence who, let's say, maybe are patriots who are against the deep state and who would support like what Assange did, which is like a cleansing, of the system, removing the tumor, revealing these unconstitutional acts of the government in the hope that you want to fix that and then get the state, the military, the U.S., Washington, Pentagon working, how it should. So, but how big that group is the question, is it like split down the middle, or do we have a majority of the military who thinks Assange is bad, and so Trump is appeasing them? But you have a valid point. You have to give and take, right? Win some, lose some.
You're talking about Ricardo Bossi, are you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I heard that interview just the other day. Former Australian Army Special Forces Lieutenant Colonel Ricardo Bossi. All right, so that's a long, like, military title, but he's also a political leader of the Australian One Party. I heard you talk to him, but he's not on this conversation, so speak freely. So how would you describe Ricardo Bossi as a politician?
Well, again, I'm not Australian, and I only learned about him recently, but I really liked what he stands for and what he's doing. So, I had a conversation with him. I had a great feeling. It was one of my favorite interviews this year. And so I think he's and a lot of the comments I got, and then the comments that you can see that he receives, is that a lot of people are supporting the ideas that he's supporting, because it's basically trying to get the insane Australian government, totalitarian, to back down and get back to normal, And so I don't see how anyone could disagree with that.
So Australia One Party, is that a new? I didn't catch that from the interview. Is that a new party?
Yeah, it's a new. I mean, again, I'm not an expert, but it's a new party that was, I think, recently created. Yeah.
Okay, and he's aiming for being the biggest one with the next elections, probably.
Yeah, I guess to grow it and to get the foot in the door.
Two things that I noticed in that interview is one is. And I'm paraphrasing big time here, so correct me. I need to be corrected probably, but one is all the Western world and China is going berserk in the coming years. We need to take care of our own, and we can. I mean, we're all for free trade, but first off, we need to. We can and we should isolate ourselves from all the mayhem going on abroad. That's one bit, and the other one is we need a solid military. So that's where his military colors come into play.
I think what he meant and I would agree with him, that the West is lost in a sense. And he was saying Canada, US, Europe, Britain, in the sense that we've given up our vigor. We haven't, like the founding fathers said, we were not paying attention or caring for our liberties and democracies. We just got used to bread and circuses. And so you can see the Western Europe and US just descending into that authoritarianism I was talking about. And I think that's what he was referring to, that we've given up, we've lost our freedoms. And we did it willingly because we just didn't care. And that's the situation that we're in. He has hope for Australia. I mean, but I'm not so sure. I mean, look what's happened in Australia. And so he was hopeful that they could have some kind of political revolution in Australia to get back to that, Western Judeo-Christian democracy. And then in terms of the military, yeah, he was saying to build up, I guess, a strong Australian military, because he says, well, wars are coming, and I don't doubt that.
Yeah, I agree. I agree there also, and I think it's inevitable. Now, he couldn't have asked for a better campaign than the one given to him by Dan Andrews. I mean, the state of Victoria is in the most horrible lockdown. Melbourne is the most horrible lockdown globally currently. People are really, really scared and panicking there. Arrested for even making a Facebook post about thinking about a demonstration. So up next, upcoming elections, if there are any elections still, he's going to win massively. If you oppose the current policies in Victoria, you're going to win. So that would be his approach. Final question. I know we're going to close there. We've talked the United States with the power struggle there. We've spoken about Mexico being your safe haven for, at least if there is any. Used to be the drugs cartel of the world, but now it's like the times are changing. We talked Australia and we talked China a little bit, but all the European Union is doing militarily is talking about a European army. One of the political parties in the Netherlands that in 1966 started as a democratic renewal party. Well, there is deep state as they come. They're as corrupt as they come. They're the ones taking away the referendum here. They're the ones that are now actively campaigning for giving our sovereignty to European Union, who is in turn then building a European army. I'm not so hopeful for European Union. Having said that, and asking you for a positive outlook on my country, because I'm not moving to Mexico. What do you see happening for European Union in the coming years?
Well, yeah, that's a tough question. You mentioned the European army, and for 20 years, like I've had that in mind, and you again, that was the trajectory, and you see more and more talk of this now, this European army, and I think if you have to understand, I mean, I've got a whole section of my bookshelf here of academic books, with titles that literally say, one world democracy, the idea of world government, and that's the end goal, and that's how I kind of inform my thinking and often get it right. Is that if you understand that their end goal is one world government, and then you just reverse engineer and extrapolate how they're going to get there. And so if that's their ideology, then of course you want to have one European army instead of 28 national armies. You want one European military structure. So that trend going forward. In terms of the EU, I know the economy is pretty bad, but the EU is a technocracy, and it's the blueprint for world government. I've just been noticing now, very interesting, it's the EU that's making deals with all different countries. Like they just signed a free trade agreement, EU-Mexico, right? EU just made a deal with Australia where they're going to give them something like, I don't know, close to $1 trillion in some kind of bonds. So EU is that world government blueprint superstructure that is now working with all of the rest of the world to try to build them up and bring them into this system. And it's a technocracy. So I think the EU is going to become more authoritarian because it's a technocracy. It's going to use that Chinese social credit system. Recently in Ireland, they're introducing this health immunity app where if you don't have this app, you won't be able to go into supermarkets or travel. Oh, yeah. If your app doesn't have the green light that shows you've been vaccinated. That's that social credit reputation score system, the technocracy. But things may remain stable in the EU. So you might have like a more stable system, but it's going to become more authoritarian, slowly.
All right, I'll give my outlook without the candle then. I'm with Martin Armstrong, who says that early next year, EU will likely disintegrate. It's not going to happen. People are going to revolt. They're not going to give their sovereignty away. We have a history of nation states, and I agree with you. If you want to keep the EU together, then you need to give all sovereignty to the corrupt leaders in the EU, and that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. They're corrupt. Either they change their behavior and start working for the people, which they're not going to do, or they're going to be there's going to be pitchforks. All right, so might look you up in Mexico after all. was a great talk. Let's talk again. I don't know, whenever we feel like it, but at least around American elections. How does that sound?
Yeah, if the internet is still up, sure.
Exactly. Zach Voorhees, the Google whistleblower, says we're going to have blackouts. Social media is going to... I'm going to talk to... I have to make one anecdote. There's a tune kicking in already. But if you talk hydroxychloroquine and zinc and all the rest of that on YouTube, you're banned if you do it positively because you're not in line with the World Health Organization. So I'm not going to do that here because this is going to be on YouTube. However, there's one doctor in the Netherlands, that has tried to prescribe that, and he was banned. It's blocked. You're not allowed to use that as a treatment for coronavirus. I'm going to interview him Wednesday. So for my new Dutch watchers, this channel has exploded in size with the coronavirus. So thanks, Corona. That's good. We're going to be talking to your hero doctor, if it's a hero for you, and ask him what he was thinking with the hydroxychloroquine and all the rest of that. Any restrictions on that medicine in Mexico, Roger?
I haven't paid much attention. A lot of Mexicans are talking about, I don't know if it's the same thing, some kind of dioxide, sodium chloride or something.
You don't know.
It actually bugs me because I don't feel there's this need to be trying to get this medicine. I mean, because I don't feel that corona is it's not a pandemic, it's not a big threat, and you just take your typical vitamin C, D, eat healthy, and you'll be fine. There's no reason to obsess over,
Hug people. Be friendly. Talk to nice people. Great talking to you, but talk to you soon.
All right.
Take care.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
Every nation in every region now has a decision to make.
You think I'm joking? Predator drones. You will never see it coming.
Laat staan dat ik kan ingaan over vuur.